The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Friday. It's September 14th. There's a lot going on in the world, but we're here for the next 2 hours talking about how we can gather tools, learn things, important concepts so that we can be the most effective, most efficient member of a team working with a child on the autism spectrum to help them to reach their fullest potential. That's what we're here for. That's the name of the game. We're working for progress, and we know that progress is available for all of our kids. I know that sometimes it doesn't feel that way, and sometimes you feel like, we're talking about the kids who are in this category, right? Because it's a big spectrum here of individuals that have different strengths and different areas of deficit. But what we know for sure, and I pause for effect because I hope you know for sure that there is progress available for absolutely everyone. Absolutely everyone. So whether you have a child who's 8 years old and doing very well, but there's just a couple of things that you need to get in there that you want to strengthen up and shore up so that they can accomplish more, that can be done. If you have a child who's 2 years old and newly diagnosed and has absolutely no communication skills, there's so much progress that can be made. If you have a child who, it's your child, but they are 45 years old, and you're looking and saying, I wish we had had this when my child was XYZ, I want you to know that the progress is still there and possible. Everybody's going to end up in a different place. That's the hard part, right? That's the part we have to come to terms with. Everybody's going to end up in a different place, and I can't tell you where you're going to end up, and I can't tell you where your child's going to end up, but I can tell you that there is progress available. And I think that when we focus on that and get into the action of creating that progress, everything gets a little bit easier. This is a tough journey, but progress makes it easier. Okay, so we're going to be talking to you, as I said, for the next 2 hours. We've got an exciting show coming up, a wonderful guest that's going to be with us in the next hour. Of course, I'm talking about Dr. Jonathon Tarbox, and he's got some really important information for us. But I want you to know that this is all meant to be interactive. We want to hear from you. We want to get your questions. We want to get your answers. We want to get your suggestions about things that you'd like to hear us talking about. We take it very seriously what you guys tell us because we're here for you. At the end of the day, at the beginning of the day, at the middle of the day, we're here to help you and support you in this journey. I am not an expert in autism. I always like to remind you guys of that, not an expert in ABA, and we do talk about ABA a lot here, applied behavior analysis, because we know that it's the only scientifically proven effective treatment for autism to be able to help everybody on that big spectrum to reach whatever their fullest potential is. But I'm not an expert in ABA. I'm a mom. And my son was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2.5. He is now 9. And I'm happy to be able to report that he is doing remarkably well and completely included neurotypical 4th grade. He is speaking now where he was not before. And we have a rich and full life. Are we still working on autism? Yes. Is there still progress to be had? Yes. Are there still some rough days? Yes, but they are not the same kind of rough days that they were, and I am thankful because we were lucky. Don't get me wrong. I know that it was because we were lucky. We lived in a state, in a time, in an era, in a specific area, so that we were able to access funds, because it didn't come out of my bank account. We sure didn't have it, right? But we were given funding by our state's regional center, and we got our therapy from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and we got our child back. And I always like to remind you guys that I know that that is not everybody's story, but I want to be able to hook you up with the answers so that your story can be what you want it to be. That's why I'm here. Not an expert, I'm the conduit. So ask me. You know that I understand that this is not easy, so ask me so that I can help you in the way that you need to be helped, because I can't assume that I already know what you need. Tell me what you need. And here are some of the ways that you can get in touch with us. If you're watching us right now on autism-live.com, you'll see that next to the box where I'm talking, there's an empty box there right now that says Shannon is answering right now. That box is active. You can type anything you want in there, hit enter, and it shows up here on my screen. You guys have already written in several things, and I'm excited to address those after the first break. But keep them coming, because that's really why we're here. So you can write in there to even just to tell us where in the world that you're watching us. I believe we're in 103 countries now. We love to know where you are. But if you're watching us and it says rebroadcast, or you're watching on any of the other places that you can watch Autism Live, you might be feeling like, oh, I'm cut off from this. You're not. There are lots of ways to get in touch with us. One of the ways that you can talk to us is via email. If you see an expert on the show, you see a topic on the show, or you don't see a topic on the show that you want to see, all you have to do is email us, let us know what you need, and all the experts that we have here, we maintain their email addresses so that we can send those requests to them and say, hey, answer this question for us. We will always give you a typewritten response, and we'll also cover your question, if it's okay with you, on the live show, the next available live show. So you can talk to us via email. You can also call us. If you want to be patched into the live show to have a conversation with me, we can do that, or you can talk to somebody outside the studio. And even when we're not here, when it's not business hours, you can leave us a message, and we will get back to you as soon as we can. If you'd like to Skype in to the live show, we can do that as well. If you have camera capability on your computer, we can have a picture of you side by side with our expert or with myself, and we can have a real sit-down conversation, which is a lovely thing. So feel free to Skype wherever you are in the world. We Skype internationally. Isn't that wonderful? And there are other ways to get in touch with us too. We are on Facebook. We love it when you interact with us on Facebook. I've got something that I'm going to be telling you about specifically on our Facebook here in just a couple of minutes. And you can always answer the question of the day on the Facebook. While you're there, check out some of the different things that we have. And please give us a like. Yeah, that's me begging. Because we're new, we're relatively new on the Facebook world, and when you like us, not only is it reinforcing to us, but it actually helps us to be available on more people's screens for more people to see the information that we post. So you're doing a good deed when you like us, and we do appreciate it. We are reinforced by it. You can also, speaking of reinforcing, you can also tweet with us. And I said this all this week, make sure if you follow us, we will follow you. It takes me a couple of days to catch up on that, but we will follow you, I promise. My Girl Scout promise. So talk to us on Twitter. It's another great way to answer the question of the day. And I'm seeing you guys type in the questions, loving it. We're going to get to these right after the first break. Thank you for participating. I am seeing it. And I want to go over a couple of different ways that you can watch us. If you're watching us on autism-live.com, we are live from 10 a.m. to noon Pacific Standard Time, Monday through Friday. The rest of the time, though, the other hours of the day and across the weekend, we rebroadcast the most recent episodes from the show. So any time of any day, you can come here and you're going to see something. But sometimes you want to see something specific. You're thinking to yourself, you know what? I've been watching Autism Live. I need a little help today because my child started doing movie talk. I got to know, what can I possibly do about movie talk? Let me see all the experts that you've had talking about movie talk. So you go to a couple of different sites and you can search for it. One of them is blip.tv. You can go there. It's like having your own DVR for Autism Live. You can type in a keyword and search all the different experts. If you just love Dr. Jonathon Tarbox, because I know you guys do, I do, and you want to watch all the interviews that we've done with him, you can type his name in and go back, and you can pause them, rewind, fast forward, search for the topic that you're searching for. They're all there. You can also do that on YouTube. We have our own channel there, and not only can you find these topics, but then you can share them, and more of you have been doing that, and we really appreciate it. This is free information, and we want it to be able to get into the hands of people who need it. So check us out on YouTube. You can leave comments on YouTube and suggestions as well there. And by the way, you can also download us for free on iTunes, another great way that you could be watching the show. And we are also available on Ustream. So all of those different ways, and by the way, they're all free, all available for everyone. Absolutely, one of the core of what we want is to be available to you in a free format. Okay, it's that time of the morning when we take on the jargon of the day. We're trying to, one word, one phrase, one anagram at a time, try to figure out what the experts are talking about when they're talking to us about our children. All this week we've been looking at some different labels. We talked about Asperger's syndrome the other day. We talked about PDD-NOS yesterday. It's time for us to take on the big kahuna, classic autism. And this is one of these things, this is a term that people use a lot, and it comes with a lot of misconceptions. And I've said, from, how many years ago was it that my son was diagnosed? And I still, when people say to me, what is autism? I still have a hard time getting it into like a 1 or 2 sentence thing. That elevator pitch that they talk about, be able to say it and say it quickly. Really, really difficult to really get your fingers on. And as a parent or a teacher or a practitioner, I think it's really important to get really good at focusing in on what it is and what it isn't. Deep breath there, right? Right now, in order to be diagnosed with autism, we have a very specific criteria, the DSM IV. That's going to change very soon, and we've talked about that before on the show, and we've gone over the DSM V as it was written a couple of months ago. We were allowed to look at it and make comments on it. That period is over now, and we don't know what changes will be made based on people's comments. But right now, at this moment in time, we have a criteria, and we've had it for over a decade, and this is what determines whether our child gets the label of autism. So I think it's worthwhile from time to time to look at what that is, what the criteria is. Okay, so there's 3 different things that we're going to look at. There's an A, a B, and a C. And I like to say, it's kind of like when you go to an Asian restaurant and they've got the columns and you can get the meal and you pick things from different columns. Although this isn't as fun as going to the Asian restaurant, right? But so we've got 3 different criteria, A, B, and C, and then within that we've got columns. So let's take a look at what our first thing that we have to look at is. A total of 6 or more items from the columns 1, 2, and 3, with at least 2 from 1 and 1 each from 2 and 3. Okay, so first we're going to think of these 3 columns. Get ready. So in column 1, it's a qualitative impairment in social integration as manifested by at least 2 of the following. Marked impairment in the use of multiple nonverbal behaviors such as eye-to-eye gaze, facial expression, body postures, and gestures to regulate social interaction. Failure to develop peer relationships appropriate to developmental level. Lack of spontaneous seeking to share enjoyment, interests, or achievements with other people, for example, by lack of showing, bringing, or or pointing out objects of interest, and lack of social or emotional reciprocity. Okay, so we're going to, for our purposes, think of this first column as the social column. And remember that our child has to have 2 of these things to begin to qualify for an autism diagnosis. So as you look through this, and I know as a parent, it's hard. It's really, really hard. But look and see, are there things on here that you recognize your child? Does your child have difficulty making eye contact? Does your child have difficulty having friends? Does your child show no facial expression or inappropriate facial expression? Does your child not understand gestures? Do they, if you do this and your child doesn't understand, if you're pointing, I think about when my child, just the other day, we took him to the doctor's office and they asked him to step up onto the scale. And I don't think she literally asked. I think she just sort of pointed like, he's 9 years old, he should know. And there was just the slightest hesitation and my son hopped up on the scale. And that's such improvement because I can remember him being 3 and 4 and them saying, can you stand up here, and then putting it in a parlance that would be appropriate for that age of a child and saying, come on now, can you hop up here and stand stand real still? And, we were dragging him over because he had no concept that that's what they were asking him to do. And they were pointing and gesturing and saying, here, he not only did he not have the receptive language, but he didn't understand the gestures either. So is that your child? Because those things count in the social. Do they share things with you? Do they come up and say, Mom, look at the frog, even if it's just in gesture? Do they point to things? Do they show an interest in the things that you point out? And if you are upset, do they show concern or do they seem oblivious to it? That's that emotional reciprocity. Do they seem to match and understand when other people are feeling distress or happy, or, is there an awareness of that? So this is the social column. Okay, you got to have 2 from this column. So imagine that a child has trouble with eye contact, but the rest of it is okay. And they may have a lot of things from the other 2 categories. They're not going to qualify. You got to have at least 2 from the social. Okay, let's move on to number 2, column number 2, qualitative impairment in communication as manifested by at least one of the following: a delay in or total lack of the development of spoken language, not accompanied by an attempt to compensate through alternative modes of communication such as gesture or mime. In individuals with adequate speech, this is one that gets missed a lot, marked impairment in the ability to initiate or sustain a conversation with others. The next one, stereotyped and repetitive use of language or idiosyncratic language. That movie talk that we were just talking about, there it is. Lack of varied, spontaneous, make-believe play or social imitative play appropriate to developmental level. So this column we lump under communication, and sometimes we will lump it under language, but you can see that there are some things in here that aren't necessarily tied to language. This is one of the complaints that people have, part of why the DSM IV is changing, that they're not having these 3 columns quite in the way that they are right now. So stop and think to yourself, where on this list does my child fit in? Is my child acquiring language in a typical way? And a lot of us assume that if a child, I mentioned the other day that with Asperger's, that this column is not this is the column that's missing for Asperger's, that they have the social and the next column that we're about to talk about, but not this column. And a lot of people will miss, though, that in individuals with adequate speech, marked impairment in the ability to initiate or sustain a conversation with others. So this is sometimes the line between Asperger's and autism, and this is where it gets a little gray sometimes. Okay, so really important, though, got to have at least 1 in order to qualify for autism. Let's go on to the third category, restricted, repetitive, and stereotyped patterns of behavior, interests, and activities as manifested by at least one of the following: encompassing preoccupation with one or more stereotyped and restricted patterns of interest that is abnormal, either in intensity or in focus. All kids will get obsessed about some things. They have their favorite character, but there's a point at which it becomes, beyond that, perseveration, where they can't let go of it. Apparent inflexibility, adherence to specific non-functional routines or rituals. Those kids who have no flexibility, got to be driven to school a certain way. They have to wear this outfit or they can't cope. Stereotyped and repetitive motor mannerisms, for example, hand or finger flapping or twisting or complex whole body movements. Our kids who rock, our kids who flap, our kids who toe walk. Persistent preoccupation with parts of objects. We see this all the time. The kids who pick up the toy car, and they're looking at the wheel, or they're taking things apart and pull. Oh man, I couldn't have a flashlight in my house. To this day, it's still hard for me to have a flashlight in my house. Now, is this going to end up being a strength for my child? You betcha. He's going to be a rocket engineer, and he's going to know how to put things together that I can't even think about. But, there was a time when absolutely anything within his grasp he would take apart, whether it was a remote or certainly the flashlights. Oh, for heaven's sake. We had a hospital stay when he had rotavirus when he was young, and he was so sick for so many days. And then he finally, started to get better. The fluids finally took and he got better. And they all but had to restrain him in the bed because he was trying to take the hospital bed apart. Bless his little soul. And if he had had a wrench, I'm telling you, he was 3 years old. He wasn't even 3. I think he was 2.5 at that point. He would have had that thing taken apart. Whoo! Parts of objects. He just didn't know how to put them back together. At 9, we're starting to work on the putting back together. Okay, so you got to have at least one. Now, if we go back to the whole idea that you had to have 6 altogether, so it doesn't quite add up, right? You had to have 2 from the first column, at least 1 from the second column, and at least 1 from the third column, but you have to have a total of 6 altogether. So imagine there are some kids who do have 2 from the social, who do have 1 from the language, and do have 1 from the repetitive and restrictive, and they still don't qualify for autism, get PDD, NOS because they didn't have enough. It's very frustrating for families. Absolutely. Okay, but remember we said at the beginning there had to be an A, a B, and a C. This is just the A component. So here's the B component. Delays or abnormal, functioning in at least one of the following areas with an onset prior to the age of 3 years old. So a delay or abnormal functioning in social interaction, language as used in social communication, or symbolic or imaginative play. So a little bit of overlap there with some of our other columns, but the important part here is that it's onset of age 3. So in the new DSM V, one of the things that were hopeful sticks that was there before the commenting period, that they were changing that phrase to not have the age 3, but to a phrase that says, that is evidenced by when it is socially appropriate, because what we see is that there are some 4-year-olds that cope, that they can do the social thing enough at 4 because what's socially, there at the age of 4 is not as taxing as what's there when you're 7. And this is one of the reasons why we're seeing a lot of kids that aren't getting diagnosed until later, because they can get by with 4-year-old social skills, but by the time they get to 7 or 15, they can't. So that's changing, hopefully, in the DSM-5. And what's the C? The C is the disturbance is not better accounted for by other disorders such as Rett's disorder or childhood disintegrative disorder, which used to be diagnosed a lot and just isn't anymore. Okay, so that is the criteria for autism. And I love to show this because then I love to go back and say, did you see anywhere where it said tantrums? It didn't. Did you see anywhere what it said self-injurious behavior? Did you see anywhere what it said lack of intelligence? It didn't. It didn't say any of those things because it doesn't. And a lot of times other people are going to judge our kids. They hear the word autism and they assume that, well, we're just going to get somebody who kicks or is violent or you know, fill in the blank. I mean, it's endless. Or can't understand spoken language, or can't speak at all. You know, there are very specific things in the criteria, and there are a lot of things that aren't there. I think that's something that we need to be mindful of. And they've had plenty of opportunity that if they wanted to, even in the DSM IV, there's nothing there that says, you know, inability to be potty trained, inability to, you know, move through life without tantrums and other challenging behavior. So just like to remind you, it doesn't say that. Okay, and we'll talk more about this today and in the coming weeks. What is autism? But I think it's we have to visit it every once in a while, be clear about it. All right, we're way past time, but it is time for the question of the day. Question of the day is meant to get you thinking, participating, and hopefully we'll have time in a couple of minutes to take a look at some of your answers. But today, our question is, what is the hardest part of social interaction for your child? And we've been asking social questions all week long, but really appreciate knowing what's the hardest part of it. And I would say, and it's interesting that I would say this because I hadn't thought about it before, that the piece that we're working on right now with my son is still perspective taking. He has a lot of perspective taking that's there, but he tends, where his friends, to miss cues where he could have an opportunity to say, okay, I don't think they're interested in that. Not everybody wants to play Minecraft endlessly or talk about it endlessly. He's really convinced that really if he said the right thing, you would be. So, you know, working on that, perspective taking and give and take about other things. So that's what we're working on, but I'd love to hear what's your answer to this question. We always have a topic of the day. It's the topic of the week, and obviously I've given it away. It's social skills. All this week we've been talking about social skills and how we can help our children. This is an area where we see great success when we take the time to work with our kids and give them plenty of opportunities so that they can try and work it out and to reinforce. But we can see lots of progress. So we'll continue talking about that today and some of the different things that we're going to be talking about today. We have on our list, and I don't know how much of it we're going to get done, but an academic tip. We did a lot of talking about IEPs yesterday, but if we have time, we'll talk about it today. We've got a social tip for you. And my favorite part of the week, we have Dr. Jonathon Tarbox that comes in for that last hour of the week, and he's got some really exciting stuff that is pivotal that we understand that he's going to come in and talk about. There are new guidelines for treatment that have been issued this week, and I'm so excited that it's been issued. My understanding, and he's going to give us clarification, is so that insurance companies have a baseline to understand what good ABA is. How fabulous is that? So we'll talk with him about that when he joins us later on. We're going to take a break. I'm going to come back and address some of the things that you guys have been writing in, and then we'll see how much of this we can get to before we get Dr. Jonathon Tarbox. But as always, your questions take precedence. So write in and stick with us. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm Bryce Myler, and I'm the Contracts Director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I've been here for about 5 years. CARD has several employees with many years of insurance experience, dealing with insurance, dealing with pre-authorizations, dealing with discovering whether there's coverage or not. So we have more experience than any ABA provider that I've ever come across. So for a prospective client, somebody that may be interested in, you know, ABA therapy and what CARD has to offer, we have a special 800 number, and you call that number. They will talk to you about what we have to offer. how ABA works. He'll ask you for the front and back of your ID card, and then we check to see if you do or do not have coverage. If you have coverage for ABA therapy, we try to do whatever we can to set it up where we can bill for you and you don't have to fight with the insurance company every month to get your claims paid. For California residents, we recently did a series of insurance trainings all over the state, and you can click on the link below to watch pretty much the full presentation. It has a lot of information, how you can get your insurance company to comply with what they're supposed to do, understanding the networks, and many other valuable pieces of information.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're taking a minute to answer some of the questions that you guys have written in already today, and I'm glad that we just showed that clip, and we're going to come back to that with one of the questions that you guys have asked just a second ago. But the first question or comment is, my son refuses to even try vegetables or fruit due to food texture issues. And this is a pretty common issue, and we hear a lot of parents talking about this, and I want to remind everybody, I'm not an expert, but we've had experts come in a lot, and we'll get people to come in and talk about it again, but I can tell you some of the things that they have said about food texture issues, that we want to move really, really slowly. And that if we do that, if we move slower than molasses in January uphill, we'll make tremendous progress over what feels like a long time, but then when you look back on it, you go, that really wasn't so long considering that we made the progress. And I don't know if this is hand in hand, but somebody else wrote in that their child likes apple juice, but that they won't eat apples. So I don't know if these two comments go together, but I'm going to assume for a second that they do, because they're interrelated in my head. So if the texture is that, for instance, a child likes to drink something, but they don't want to chew and they don't want to eat something, and we've talked about this with the A Word, the documentary The A Word, that we watched an episode a couple of weeks ago where they were talking about the fact that the child doesn't want to have to chew on anything. And while that's disconcerting in terms of a nutrition thing, and it's limiting in terms of nutrition, it also creates a problem because the chewing actually helps to get those muscles going, so that even when the child isn't talking, that we're working on oral motor, which is really going to have an impact. Because if we get to the point where we make it reinforcing enough for this child to speak and they can't be understood, they're not going to get as much of the reinforcement as we want them to get and understand how fabulous communicating is. So we have to get the chewing happening on a couple of different fronts. It's really, really important, and it's not just about the nutrition. As if the nutrition wasn't important enough, right? The nutrition is important. So what the experts sort of across the board have said to us is that when working on food texture issues, and of course you need to consider taking your child to a medical doctor to rule out medical issues, to make sure that everything is working and that the swallowing mechanism, that there's nothing medical that's preventing your child from being able to do that. I know sometimes we go, oh, you know, of course, but it doesn't go without saying. For if you're watching, you know, see if you can get that component of it taken care of right away, because otherwise you run the risk of just making your child frustrated. But if the medical component is fine and there's no physical reason why your child can't be chewing and swallowing without gagging or, you know, choking, then we can start to work on that slow progression. So if you start out with apple juice and go from an apple juice either that is filtered to an apple juice that isn't filtered, so that it's a little cloudier in texture, but you know that there's a little bit of grit to it, and see if the child will tolerate that. It may be that you have to mix half and half, and I think you can get pasteurized apple juice that isn't filtered, I think, or cider or something like that. See like how little can you move and still have your child not react to it. And then very slowly, there was an example that somebody had come in and talked to us about, you know, getting that food processor out on the counter and moving just, you know, moving the hair on the child just a little bit more every day or every other day, day, maybe, sticking, if you've got a cup of applesauce and sticking a teaspoon of apple juice and sticking a teaspoon of applesauce in it and mixing it up and see if they notice. And over time, literally, if you have to make yourself a chart and say, okay, every 3 days I'm going to add a quarter of a teaspoon, you will see that over time, your child will begin to tolerate, and we're not pushing it, right? But it will turn into a thing where eventually you've gotten to the point where they're eating applesauce. And then we go to grittier, chunkier applesauce. Then eventually we get to stewed apples. And then eventually we get to a cooked apple where we're playing with forks and knives to cut up the cooked apple, and maybe eventually get to the point where they bite into an apple. But it literally is something that we don't have to be in a tremendous hurry. We don't have to make it a battleground. We want to go as slow as possible and make sure that we're reinforcing. A little bit dicey, because I think especially in the beginning, you don't even want to let them know. You're trying to get something by on the down low. You're squeezing a little bit of apple sauce into that apple juice, but reinforce them in general for their good, taking a drink. That's what's wonderful. But don't tell them that you're sneaking it in there. And we can do this with any kind of food, by the way. That if your child is into more liquid things, that you've been mashing up the bananas, keep mashing up the bananas, but, stop mashing a second earlier. And every day or every 3 days, whatever your child will tolerate, mash a second less than you were before. We can do that with everything, but go slow. I think that's what our experts tell us is the key. Go slow and reinforce. Okay, I'm going to mark that complete. Somebody else wrote in this awesome question about how do we find funding. I'm in Illinois, and so the state is broker than broke, and we can't afford ABA. I'm the mom earlier this week with a 15-year-old daughter. So we're showing that question. Thank you for writing it. And this is one of the most important questions, and we do talk about funding from time to time. You just saw a video with Bryce Myler. Bryce Myler is an autism, that's wrong. I was going to say she's an autism mom. She's not. Her child had autism, and he recovered a long time ago. Is in college, has a job, drives his truck, was very profoundly affected by autism. You can see her story in the video, Recovered, but Bryce is one of the most amazing people on the face of the earth. You want to talk about having somebody in your corner, she gets it. And she works at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and she was talking about, finding out whether you're eligible for insurance funding. I think that's the first thing that you got to do. And we had a little tip on that earlier this week. It's up on YouTube. Gave you 3 little tips, something you can do today so that you can determine or begin to determine whether you qualify for funding. I don't know where in Illinois you live, but there is a Chicago office of the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And if you live close enough to that, I would encourage you in any case to call the number that Bryce gave on the screen, and we'll get that for you, the 800 number. Or you can go to centerforautism.com and either call the 800 number or call the Chicago office. They're probably going to put you through to the 800 number anyway. And when you call the 800 number, the first person you speak to is Amy Fuentes. Tell her Shannon sent you. And let her know that you found out about it on Autism Live. Amy's an amazing person too. She was one of my son's therapists, and she's an amazing young woman who is committed to helping families. But you can also visit www.autismvotes.org to see, but I am as positive as I can be without looking at it that you have insurance reform. I know you have insurance reform in Illinois. But it becomes a question of, does your policy actually fit the criteria? Which means you're probably going to have to call your HR director. And this is assuming, and I don't mean to assume, but that's assuming that you do have some form of insurance. You may be somebody who doesn't. And there are a lot of people out there who have no form of insurance. But you got to rule out first if you do have insurance, whether you're covered or not. Because if you are, that's the quickest way. That's the quickest way that you're going to get funding for ABA is through insurance right now. If you don't have insurance, in a lot of states where they have insurance reform, they're offering gap insurance. It's not inexpensive, but that webinar that Bryce was talking about, there's some important information about gap insurance that you're going to want to consider, because it makes a difference when you sign up how much they can charge you, and it makes a big difference. So you might want to check out that webinar on CARD's YouTube channel with Bryce Myler, M-I-L-E-R. And beyond that, though, if you know 100% and you say, I don't have insurance and my state is not going to fund it, what am I going to do? There are places that you can apply for grants, but being able to, at this point in the economy, to get a grant, to have a team of people come into your home to do ABA, it's a lot of money, and the grants are few and far between to get the whole program funded. But there are some things that you can do. When there's a will, there is a way, and there have been lots of families that have come before all of us that have found the way to make this work. One of the things that people do is I'm so excited about what I'm talking about. I want to make sure I say this correctly. You can put together a team of people, whether they're paid or volunteers, and have them work with your child. There are lots of people that do this. You wouldn't be the first person to invent this wheel. I don't think we have the video that we can show right now, but there's a family in Middle America. Do we have the Maddie video? Emily, are we? It's okay, we can't show it today. But in any case, there was a family that had a young daughter that they wanted to get ABA for. They had seen the statistics, they saw the studies, and they said, this is what we have to do. And they went to their church, but other families have done this, going to sororities or just to, the local Kiwanis Club or the Elks, or, they put out the call and say, I need to put together a team of volunteers, and here's what you're going to get out of it. I'm going to get you some of the best training in the world, so that after you work with my child for a year, you're going to be able to go and say, I have experience as an ABA therapist, and I worked with a child this many hours. There are people who are willing to do that. There are people on college campuses that need the experience because they want to go into this field. There are people who are becoming BCBAs who need hours working with children. You can't imagine, until you ask, how many people there are that are out there who are willing to help you. Now, you have to give them the training, and you need a core of understanding what you want to teach your child. And you can get all of that with CARD learning and with skills, which is infinitely less expensive, and you can get grants for those things. You can ask for a grant for CARD learning and say, I need to train a team of 12 people. So I need a grant for CARD learning. Autism Care and Treatment Today, www.act-today.org, gives grants for those kinds of things. So, lots of different avenues. I would need to know, I'd like to help you more. So I would need to know more about your individual circumstances. I'd want to rule out that insurance is just not an option right now. Because if you have insurance that's going to cover it, it's the easy answer. But it's not the only answer. So, I hope, write more. And let's talk about, and we can even talk off air to see what your options are, because whenever I hear a parent who says, I want to do ABA, and you can with a 15-year-old daughter and have tremendous things happening, I want to help you to find the way. And I know that there is a way somehow. So write to more. And we'll talk more, but those are just some things. I feel like I've overwhelmed you. Okay, one more question. Okay, just looking at this, making sure that there's no private information in it before I show it on the screen. Hi, Shannon. The teacher didn't notify one of the service providers of my child's IEP, so now they want to convene instead of providing the service. How can a parent ensure everyone was invited to an IEP? You can invite anybody to an IEP you want. And what you might want to do in the future is say to them who has been invited. Now, we had services from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and my IEP team did not invite them. They just never ever did that. I don't think it ever occurred to them to invite them. I invited them. And I'm not completely understanding. So now they want to convene instead of providing the service. Is it that they're wanting to provide the service themselves and they don't want the provider to do it? Because a lot of times that's how schools are. If you haven't had the IEP meeting yet, invite your provider. You are entitled to bring whoever you want. Now, within reason. Usually IEPs are held in really small rooms, and I have on occasion threatened to bring 45 people just because I was that upset about things. You don't really want to be doing that, and that's not beneficial. Don't do that. That's me being off the rails. But you can, but tell them who you're bringing. When they give you the invitation, and they have to give you an invitation with a bit of a window before, the time of the meeting, you write back and say, yes, I will be there on this day, and I will be bringing X, Y, and Z. Or I'll be inviting to bring, so, maybe you don't know for sure, but I'll be inviting, my child's case supervisor to come and one of his therapists or whatever, whoever is beneficial to you. You can say, I'm bringing my cousin's wife with me, and you don't have to disclose if she happens to be an autism advocate. I think you have to disclose if somebody is a lawyer. But other than that, you can't bring animals, but you are allowed to bring whoever you want, and take it upon yourself to invite the people that you want. But you can say who else has been invited to this meeting. I generally ask that. Who are we having? And the other component, and this is very much an issue in my life right now, is when they're going to have an IEP meeting, ask who is going to be presenting. There's usually some person who's the head of your IEP team, and you ask them who's going to be presenting, who is having a moment here to say, and can I have copies of all of the reports that they're going to present from 48 hours in advance. Makes it so much better. There's no blind side. And ask for that in writing. But that's what I would do. I'm not sure that I completely understood in terms of the convening. So if I didn't hit it, if I'm not making sense based on what you said, write back and give me more clarification, and we'll go back to it. Okay, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back with some interesting information. Stick with us.
I'm Adele Nadowski, Director and Co-Creator of Skills. CARD e-learning is an online tool that has been developed by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. CARD e-learning is the training that is delivered to the ABA therapists at CARD to train them on the principles of applied behavior analysis and to equip them with the knowledge they need to essentially deliver the ABA-based techniques during their therapy with the children that they work with. ABA has been proven scientifically to be the most effective intervention for children with autism. At this point, even the Surgeon General has come out with a statement suggesting just that. So we know that this is something that children with autism definitely need if they're going to improve and live the lives that we're hoping that they're going to be able to live. By being able to train people on this one particular method that we know works, and to be able to have all of your staff within your school settings on the same page, it allows you to take more of a multidisciplinary approach, and there's definite consistency going on within the team. It makes sure that every person involved with that child's treatment program, including the speech and language pathologist, the occupational therapist, the teachers, the aides, all of these individuals to be able to be trained so that they can all work together effectively with the child. Parents that are using CARD e-learning can use it either to train themselves, and then after having done that they can implement different techniques with their child in order to teach new skills. But oftentimes parents might also be working either with an ABA provider, with a school, or they may have even hired their own therapist to deliver the intervention techniques. So CARD e-learning can be used either to collaborate with your school. It can also be used to train the therapists that are coming to the home of the parents, or it can also be shared with the ABA provider so that that provider can find out about it and perhaps implement it within their organization and train their staff. You can also do reporting for your organization. So you can actually look and find out which teachers are progressing, what their quiz scores are, and actually we can give you reports as well that will help you to compare the different teachers and their performances. CARD e-learning is really simple to use. You can log on to this as long as you have a computer, that's all you need, and an internet connection. And you can work on it any time of the day, anywhere that you're at. When you log on, you realize that right away. First of all, on the top of the page, there's a navigational tutorial. It's a how to use this page button. Simply by watching that video, it'll all kind of unfold in front of you and it becomes extremely self-explanatory. CARD e-learning has 9 modules and you can basically go through those at your own pace. You're going to be watching videos that are kind of like a storyboard with narration, but in addition to that, there's many different video clips of therapists actually implementing the techniques that are being described within the storyboard that you can also watch. And then of course you're able to pause, you're able to type notes right directly underneath the video that you're watching. You can save your notes, you can review them, and between each module you do take a quiz. And once you pass that quiz, you can go on to the next module. And then after you complete all of them, you have a final exam. And by completing the final exam and passing with a score of 85% or better, you will be given a certificate of completion. Let me show you how easy it is to use CARD e-learning.
Welcome back to Autism Live. From time to time, we do an academic tip, things that we can do to help our children to and I pause because it's so many different things. It could be to help our child catch up if they're behind. It could be to help our child get ready if they're about to go to preschool or go to kindergarten and start school. Either way, if the academic curriculum is not meant to, the stuff that we talk about for academic is not meant to take the place of what's happening in school. It's meant to go hand in hand with it to set us up for success. We talk about that all the time. Let's set ourselves up for success. And I know as a former teacher, kids walk in the door and everybody's on a different level. And that's regardless of how typical their development was, everybody's on a different level. And we all have areas where we're missing something, right? I always say the Swiss cheese, teaching the Swiss cheese, because everybody's got holes. But it's particularly poignant in grade school because you see kids who are struggling, and again, this is neurotypical and kids on the spectrum equal. They all have areas of deficits. Maybe with our kids on the spectrum, there's the potential for the deficit to be huger. But my child right now is in a completely neurotypical classroom, and I see that they're 4th grade, and there are kids that have huge, they're not on the spectrum, but they have huge areas of deficits that, are not my sons. So, I offer that up, that it's not, sometimes it's soothing to me to realize that it's not just our kids on the spectrum. We all need some help and support sometimes. But the point is that we can fill those holes in, whether it's kids on the spectrum or kids that are struggling with things for other reason. We can fill those holes in, and when we do, when you take a child who's got maybe they're able to do this skill, but way back here they missed one little part of this skill that if it was filled in, if they had that skill, it could be put together with this skill, and this child could fly. This child could be making so much progress and so much improvement. So really important that we try to get our kids in the classroom as caught up as possible. And that's really what the academic curriculum is designed to do, is to help and support them. And I'm talking specifically today about handwriting and penmanship. What can we do to help our kids get caught up? What can we do to help them achieve success? Now, in the area of autism, depending on where you are in the spectrum, there can be a lot of other things that are preventing our kids from being able to be successful in this area. We talked the other day about doing the pushpin art, because sometimes getting a child to sit up at a desk and get the posture, the core posture, and to have their hand and be asking the message to go from the brain down the hand to do this, there's a lot going on there, right? And if there's sensory issues going around and the motor coordination, you don't have the muscles built up in the fingers to be able to do this, we can be setting up frustration, right? And we don't want to do that with handwriting. So earlier in the week, we talked about the pushpin art. Is there other stuff that we can do? Absolutely. On my list of things here under resources of things that we can do, I meant to bring some with me, but do you guys know what wiki sticks and bendaroos are? Bendaroos are more well-known. Wiki sticks are a little bit, past, but you watch late night commercials, especially around the holidays. They have those colored, they look like strings, but then they twist them up and they stay into a shape, sort of like old-fashioned pipe cleaners, but there's no sharp edge at the end, and they're not fuzzy. It's literally like string that's been dipped in wax. They look kind of like candle wicks. I guess that's where the wiki sticks came from. And they've got just enough wax on them that you can smush them together or put them in a shape and they'll hold the shape, but you can pull them apart afterwards, so they're a little gummy. And you see kids that make little sculptures out of the wiki sticks. I would encourage you to get a package of the bendaroos. You can get them at most toy stores now. They used to only sell them online, but you can get them at most toy stores, because what you can do with a bendaroo is you can make it into the shape of letters of the alphabet so that there's a hole in the middle. And one of the first things that we want to do is to get a child finding it reinforcing to have created something with lines that they can look at and go, I did that. And we're also going to reinforce them with other things that are already reinforcing to them. But it really is very exciting when we've taught a child their name and to get them to be at the point where they can write their name and to do it by themselves. And this can be tricky, but if we bend the bendaroos literally into the format to make it like a stencil, and then you stick it to the paper, and you have the child with some sort of writing utensil that's appropriate for where their tripod grasp is right now, all they have to do is trace inside the letters of what you created with the bendaroo, and then you can peel the bendaroo off, and there is their name. It's kind of like a little bit of a magic trick, and for some reason, I don't know, there's something sensory about the sticky of the bendaroo that a lot of the kids tend to really like it. Now, that's not going to be everybody, so you might see with your child that they go, oh, they don't like the sticky. Their hand's touching it, and they're getting concerned about it, and it shuts the whole thing down. Okay, there's other things that we can do. But for some kids, it's just the thing. And it takes time. It's a little time intensive, but especially to do their name and stick it to the paper, and then you can do art projects with it. It could be very reinforcing for the kids and gets them working on that motion of writing their name and saying the letters out loud and getting the handwriting and having it be neat, because the bendaroo prevents them from going outside the line. And you can make it a very small area, or gradually you can make the letter bigger so that there's more, and they're having to concentrate hand-eye coordination of getting it directly between the lines. You can even set up exercises for them where you lay out two sticks in a line and that they have to trace between them, or you have a circle, anything at all like that. We can also do this with stencils and mazes. I love a good trip to the dollar store. Can I get an amen? Good trip to the dollar store. They usually have those clear plastic stencils that will have letters of the alphabet, and sometimes they have different shapes, and you can put it on the paper and be having a lovely time with a child. And you can have pens with different, you can have felt tip pens with different colors, and have them stick the pen in and do the thing in the stencil, and you pull the stencil off, and then you say the letter. Now you're working on handwriting, you're working on fine motor, and you're working on letters at the same time, and you're reinforcing it, and giving them tickles and hugs and going, yay, you you made a B. It's wonderful. And you can even be saying the sound of the letter at the same. You made a B. It's a B. Yay! You did a great job. You can also do this with mazes too, that if you get a book of mazes and you can start with their finger going around the circle in the maze and then eventually do it with a crayon, do those short crayons so that we're getting that tripod grasp, and then eventually go to pencils, and you can go thicker pencils if you want, or those pencils that have the, looks like a triangular eraser tube that goes on it that forces them to do the tripod grasp. Really, really wonderful. But we want to be working always giving them an opportunity to repeat, repetition, so that we're building the muscles, but we're reinforcing it and making sure that it's reinforcing. Praise isn't going to be enough. You got to pull out big guns to reinforce, but this is going to set our kids up for more success in school when they're doing handwriting and penmanship. There is no age at which we need to say, okay, well, we're done with that. You know, if you've got an older child whose penmanship is absolutely horrible, you know, you can work on these things. They even have computer programs in which to work on these things. If you've got a pad and kind of a tablet thing, ways that they can use their finger or use a stylus and be reinforced. We had a little toy that worked on handwriting, and they would give the letter, and there was a little screen on the toy that he could take in the back of the car, and he would write the letter, and he had to do it in the exact way that they said. And if he did it, lights went off and he got to play a little game and saw a little cartoon. And if he didn't do it that way, it just did nothing. It was like the game shut off. So we can work on this at whatever age, at whatever level, but penmanship and handwriting, we want to make sure that we set them up for success, always. Okay, it is time for us to show this week's A word, and when we come back from the A word, we're going to be joined by Dr. Jonathon Tarbox. Now is a great time if you have questions for Dr. Tarbox to be writing in, but until then, I want you to take a look at this wonderful documentary being made by the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, following a little boy, Jack Riley. He was diagnosed with autism at the age of 2, and where we're picking it up in the series, this is episode 5. He's about 2 weeks into therapy. There's already been progress. They're having their first clinic where they sit down with a team and talk about what's happening. So take a look. This is the A word.
To infinity and beyond.
So how's the first 2 weeks?
Great and awful.
Yeah?
Yeah, it's great progress, and it's hard to get used to. Last Friday was rough for him. At the end of the second week, he had a rough. I think every session was rough for him.
He's doing really well. Like, I held up a green marker to him last night and asked him what color, and he said green.
Yeah,
no prompting.
Unprompted.
And black did the same thing.
Black and blue and green, he's doing okay.
The fact that he'll say colors without us telling him first, that's huge. But
He's trying to say everything.
it is
He tries to say tangled.
Oh, yeah.
He says cars really well, of course.
You say tangled? Tangled.
Oh, yeah.
You say Bambi?
Oh, Bambi! I'm excited that he's talking so much.
He's got a lot to say these days.
Aw.
Same.
Red.
Good, sorry.
Red is always hard for him, so that's awesome. He usually just says bleh for red. He'll just vocalize something.
Do whatever comes out.
They like it when I say something, so I'll say something.
I know, he's so quick to do it now.
You want the doll? Oh, she's pretty. Kiss her. Give her kisses.
Aww.
Give her kisses.
Clinic is where therapists come on the team together, as well as the supervisors and the parents and the child. And it's a great way to talk about his progress, and if the parents have concerns about the programs that we're doing or problem behaviors that come up. It's just a great way for us to have communication with each other and be on the same page, so we're consistent with everybody that's involved, parents, therapists, and supervisors. Oh, you found it. What is that?
Oh no.
What is it? Guitar, yeah?
Guitar.
So we're having him demand for things, meaning we're having him request for things, and if he knows the label, we're having him say the label. So, I mean, approximations are okay, but as long as he's asking us for something instead of having us just give it to him. So that requires him to talk even more. Which book do you want? Which one? Mickey book? Whoa! Do you want the Mickey book or the Thomas book? Which one? Jack Riley? No. Hey kiddo, which one? Thomas book or Mickey book? No. Which one, Jack Riley? No. Do you want the guitar? Guitar? Yeah? Okay. Alright. That's okay. Here. Look. Look. We're gonna show Suzanne that you know what a car is. Okay. Here. Touch car. Good. What is it? It's car. Okay, what is it? Good job. Good job, kiddo. You gotta look better though, okay? Let's sit up and look at it. There we go. Wow, you're gonna show Suzanne the car?
Vroom, vroom.
Touch car. Good. What is it? What is it? It's a car. Good. What is it? Good job. Oh, that's Suzanne.
Hi.
Hold on.
Oh, you want to see? You can't see yourself. You got to be on the other side, silly.
Woohoo! See? Do you see yourself? Yeah. Wow.
Oh.
Really? Yeah. He's doing a lot of talking by himself. No way. I know. He wants to have a conversation so badly today.
I know.
I know. You got a lot to say today. How else do you feel? Huh? How else do you feel today? Do you feel happy? Touch car. Good job. What is it? Car. Very good. Say, look, Dad, I did it. I did it.
Good job.
No?
What are you calling that? If you say touch the thing in your hand.
Oh, what we're doing is we're having one of the objects is one of the labels that we want, which is car, which is what we're working on, and we have a distractor. So we want to see the object that we're focusing on with something else to see if he actually can discriminate between the two. So I mean,
I got you.
so our goal is just to see if he can pick the right object,
Right object.
basically. Touch. Hold on. Touch. Hold on. Hold on. Wait a minute. Okay. Ready? Okay. Touch car. No. Try again. Try again. Okay. Okay. Last one. Last one. Touch car. Yeah, touch it though. Touch car. Good. What is it? Ugh. What is this? What is this? Yes, car. Okay. Someone helping him to stop? Okay. Yeah. Hi.
That's the first time I've seen him really say hi. Well, he's very interested with
Did you just say hi?
He just looked at her and said hi.
He did.
And he looked at the camera and he said,
No, he doesn't. That's seriously.
I've never seen him say hi to anybody, which is that's like the first thing we wanted to say to our families and stuff. Is just say hi. He says bye bye.
Okay, come on, buddy.
let's go. Go, Dad.
Bye bye.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We are here right now with Dr. Jonathon Tarbox. Always so thrilling to have you here on Fridays at 11 o'clock. You are the Director of
Research and Development
at
the Center for Autism and Related Disorders.
It's a mouthful for me, so I'm glad you jumped in and helped me.
And the Executive Director of Autism Research Group.
Okay, wonderful. And we're going to talk all about more of that in just a minute. But we had a question earlier in the week that I wanted to have you weigh in on, because we've had several people ask it in several different ways.
Sure.
When our children are really interested in playing with and heavily reinforced by things that are no longer age appropriate. The example that somebody had written in about was a 10-year-old, I believe, who is still really into Baby Einstein. And we've had other parents write in and say, you know, that age with, you know, things like Thomas the Tank or the Disney sing-along videos, a lot of kids are really obsessed with, and it gets to a point where it's no longer productive, but it's the thing that's been reinforcing.
Right.
We want to hang on to things that are reinforcing, but how do we get them to age appropriate? So I know you're the man on these kinds of things. Help us out here.
I'm not sure about that, but I'll do my best. So that can be a really tricky thing to deal with. You know, as a behavior analyst, the very first thing that we're always concerned with, pardon me, is having effective reinforcement. And so that's the number one thing, right? Like which reinforcers are going to be effective. And the thing that matters the most with that is what the kid cares about, not necessarily what you care about or what anybody else cares about. So that's priority one. However, as you say, that does, if you only focus on that, then that does get kind of socially inappropriate or age inappropriate sometimes. I mean, frankly, a lot of the kids we work with would rather just eat M&Ms all day for all the reinforcers. We're not going to do that just because that's a favorite thing. So there has to be some limits, right? Of course. Due to nutrition, age appropriateness, social context, culture, religion, you name it. All these factors impact which reinforcers you select. You know, I guess what I would say is, you know, you should ask yourself a common sense, or I don't know if it's common sense is the right word, but sort of practical question of what difference is it really making to the kid that thing that he likes that's age inappropriate, how much of it is about the fact that you are not happy with him doing something age inappropriate versus how much is it really actually impacting his life. So for example, if a 10-year-old is, you know, going on the playground talking to his peers about Baby Einstein, that's going to be a disaster socially, right? That will literally exclude him from social interactions. However, if a 10-year-old, you know, just worked really hard on his homework for an hour and now has 10 minutes of video time alone in his room and he chooses to watch Baby Einstein, is that really a big deal? I mean, is it having an impact on his life? Maybe, you know, wouldn't it be better if he was doing something that's more age appropriate? Sure. But is it really having a negative impact right then in that controlled setting with no one else watching? Not really. Who cares? So, you know, that's sort of the first question to ask. And usually it's not that black and white. Usually there's some more gray area. I was just going to say,
I don't know, because I'm always trying to think into the future, and if it's okay now, but what happens? So thank you for saying it's not always that black and white.
Yeah, so it's not always that black and white. And then so sort of the next thing you can try to do is come up with some variation on the theme that your child really cares about, where that variation is a little bit more age appropriate. So if there's a particular, you know, character that the kid really likes and he's doing wood frame puzzles, which are for babies, well, maybe work on writing, you know, stories, you know, having the child write stories on a similar topic, or, you know, drawing and painting pictures on a sort of similar topic, you know, something where the activity itself is more age appropriate, but still kind of references the theme or the topic that the child really enjoys. But yeah, it is challenging.
Yeah, it is. And I was trying to think in terms of, because some of the Baby Einstein videos have toys in them, and some of them are baby toys, but some of them aren't. And seeing about maybe getting some of the toys from the video that aren't, like there's one in particular that I remember, because it seemed like it played in my house for 7 years. It wasn't, but it seemed like it. There was one in particular that's that sort of, it defies gravity, the little wheel that goes around the
I know exactly what you're talking about,
that, you know, that might be a thing to give as a reinforcement so that it has the connection between the thing, but it's hard because a lot of the toys in it are baby toys.
Yeah. You know, another thing to ask yourself is how much is this really critical reinforcer to use for my child's education and therapy versus how much is it just something that they're really obsessed with and they like to do all the time?
Oh,
you know,
okay.
so if you have really powerful, effective reinforcers, and there are other things that the child will, you know, do in their leisure time, even if it's not their very favorite thing, then maybe it's not the end of the world to gradually reduce the amount of contact that the child has with this thing that they're really obsessed with that's age inappropriate. So for example, you know, if you have 5 or 10 different types of reinforcers that your child's earning during education or therapy, and the thing they're really obsessed with, Baby Einstein, is one of them, or is maybe even their favorite one, as long as you have lots of other effective motivators, it's probably not the end of the world to gradually decrease.
Okay.
And you know, the other thing too is, sometimes folks feel like, well, it's either all or nothing. So either I sit my kid in front of Baby Einstein 3 hours a day, or we have to throw them all in the trash.
Right.
Well, that's not a real choice. That's an artificial choice. You can decrease the amount of time. So now maybe instead of an hour every evening in front of Baby Einstein, we could start with, you know, 50 minutes, then the next week 40 minutes, the next week 30 minutes, while also introducing other things, many other things that hopefully your child will catch on to and enjoy also, while gradually decreasing the thing that's age inappropriate.
And so no cold turkey. We don't have to do cold turkey.
You can if you want to, yeah, but and it's, I guess, easier conceptually, right? Because you know exactly what to do. No more X, you know what I mean?
Yeah, but
that's going to be tougher on, it's going to be tougher on the kid. And if it really genuinely is something that the kid's really obsessed with and really, really loves, that is going to be kind of rough to suddenly just have it, you know, not have it the next day. And, you know, especially, you know, the kid might miss it, you know, genuinely miss it. And, you know, separate from maybe having challenging behavior or tantrums or something else, they might genuinely feel sad, you know?
Yeah.
And there's no, I mean, sometimes that's part of learning and growing up is feeling sad, but we don't need to make our kids feel sad when it's unnecessary. So maybe a more gradual approach is good. But be careful with that, though. That doesn't mean negotiate or bargain. That doesn't mean, you know, feeling tired. I know myself. I know parents. You know, it doesn't mean getting tired and sliding back because you just don't want to deal with it. It means just being gradual and systematic.
Okay, wonderful. And somebody's writing in saying, thank you for these questions about Baby Einstein. See, I didn't forget that you asked this. It's about how much perseveration, thank you, borrowing these lips. It's about how much perseveration is okay. Is that reward of perseverating like watching YouTube John Mayer audience applause repeatedly over and over, and okay for how long is it appropriate?
Yeah, great question.
Get the gist,
and so
gist of that?
I do, yeah. And so basically the issue here is if I let my child perseverate too much on a particular topic, am I sort of encouraging perseveration on that topic in general, right? So honestly, there really isn't enough research on that for us to know for sure. There have been a couple studies, though, that have shown if you use children's obsessions as rewards for working, so you use things that they really perseverate on as reinforcers, and or you allow them to engage in stereotypy or perseveration as reinforcement in itself, there are a couple studies showing that doesn't increase perseveration outside of those sessions. But it's really preliminary, just a couple studies, and there really needs to be more research on that.
But actually, you know, it's interesting that you should bring that up because I was in a discussion with some parents the other day in which we were talking about that very thing, and a couple of different moms were saying, and I thought, oh, I haven't really thought about this in a long time, but my son makes high-pitched noises, still does. That's his sort of stimmy thing that he does. And it got to a manageable place when we were able to say to him, this is when you're allowed to do it, and then stim your face off.
Right.
But the rest of the time, here are the places that it isn't appropriate.
And as long as there's very clear cues about what makes it appropriate or inappropriate, for example, in your room by yourself with no one able to hear it, not a big deal, then yeah, there's no reason to think that that's going to encourage him to then do it more outside of those circumstances.
We actually saw it reduce in the other places.
You just need to be clear about when it can happen and when it can't.
And it became more effective when he was doing it inappropriately. If we would call it his attention, he became much better at self-regulating and going, oh, you know, okay, I'm not doing that. He seemed to have much more control over it when it had an appropriate outlet. Okay, and I think this is in addition to this, they said we never grew up being able to repeat our favorite parts of programs. How is this ability to repeat electronics enabled, and how electronics enabled these perseverations? You know, because when we were kids, we couldn't go back. I remember being able to watch Wizard of Oz once a year. You know, it came along and man, everybody had to be quiet so you could watch Wizard of Oz, and now kids can see it 30 times in one afternoon. I wonder how much worse
and especially something like YouTube is just so rapid. You can watch the same thing over and over 100 times in an hour. Yeah,
absolutely.
You know, again, it may well be encouraging that behavior, but as long as you bring that behavior under appropriate sort of control of appropriate contexts, so here's when it's okay to do it, and here's all these other times when it's not okay to do it, it shouldn't matter too much. You know, I mean, again, not enough research on that, but clinically I know, and I've talked to many colleagues who say, yeah, this works. There just has to be clear cues. In fact, some people use bracelets, like there's two different colored bracelets. If you're wearing a green bracelet, you get to do whatever the stereotypy is. If you're wearing the red bracelet, you don't. And so you just swap the bracelets on and off. You know, so that's an option too. But a lot of times it's easier to just do more clear environmental cues, like in your bedroom by yourself. Big deal.
I started to laugh because the other day my son wanted popcorn, and I said, oh, I don't want to get popcorn because then I'm going to eat it.
Right.
And he said, Mom, here's what we're going to do. This is literally what he said to me. We're going to put a rubber band around your wrist, and every time you think you're going to eat the popcorn, I want you to snap it. And I said to him, where have you heard this? He saw it on some show.
That's funny.
Saw it on some show. But that was immediate. I said, where have you gotten that from? Because we never did anything even remotely like that. He's like, this is how we're going to combat this, Mom. From my 9-year-old. Gotta love that. This is what children's television does. Okay, we're going to take a break, and we're going to come back and talk with Dr. Tarbox about this new plan that has come out. I don't even know what recommendations
from the Behavior Analyst Certification Board.
Okay.
On what constitutes appropriate and evidence-based and medically necessary treatment for autism spectrum disorders.
Okay, this is important for all of us, so we're going to come back and delve into this and have him explain it to us, because I don't get it. Stick with us. Hi, I'm Shannon Penrod, and this is my son, Jem. We're here today at the Home Depot. You might know that Home Depot is famous for giving free classes to adults on lots of things like tiling and other home crafts. Well, they also have free classes for kids as well. It's called the Kids Workshop. We love doing that, don't we, Jem?
Yeah.
It's cool. So come on inside with us and let's do a craft.
Yay.
The Kids Workshop is a program that's been around with Home Depot almost since we've been a company, and it's been developed to allow kids in the community to come in and give them an opportunity to build something, to be able to create something, and be able to take just simple wood pieces and put them together with nails and hammers and screwdrivers and then paint them.
So you do this every first Saturday of the month.
Any Home Depot that you go to on the first Saturday of every month between 9 and 12, you can join different associates throughout different stores and build these projects with these kids.
And do they have to do anything beforehand, or can they just show up on that Saturday?
All they need to do is show up. We have all the tools, all the materials that the kids will need. We have aprons that we give to the kids that they can take home and maintain their pins. They get pins on a regular basis for completing projects. With that, they can keep track of how many projects they've done. And
it's all free.
It's all absolutely free, all provided.
Which is wonderful. And Wilson, I have to say, you know, you guys devised this for all kids to be able to do this.
Correct.
What I particularly love about it as an autism mom, it gives my child a place to come and learn a new skill, to socialize with kids of all kinds.
Absolutely. And that's what we're here for. Home Depot is definitely love to be involved with the community and bring the community in to work with us. That's what we love to do.
Welcome back to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod, and we are here right now with Dr. Jonathon Tarbox. And with all this new insurance reform and more people having access, thank goodness, to ABA through their insurance, it's raised some questions in a lot of people's minds about how are we going to make sure that the level of ABA therapy is quality and appropriate, and who's going to determine this, and what's going to happen. And you are here to share with us some new recommendations that have come out. So who put this together, first of all? Let's start there.
So the Behavior Analyst Certification Board, or the BACB, is the credentialing board that offers the BCBA certification.
Okay. So the board certified behavior analysts, and they have to, we've talked before on the show about the fact that they have to go through a lot of education and hours and
you have to take
test.
You have to have a master's degree in a related field to ABA, but it could be, you know, special education, things like that. And you have to take 5 master's level courses. covering various aspects of ABA and ethics. And then you have to do basically a year or a year and a half long internship or practicum hours underneath someone else who's already a BCBA. After you get all that done, then you take an examination, and if you pass the exam, then you're certified as a behavior analyst.
And the board that governs this and gives out the licenses, they've sat down, the certification, excuse me, they've sat down and said, here are our recommendations for what we think quality ABA is going to look like, what it's going to
for children with ASD. Exactly. Yeah, and so they put together the BACB put together a task force of experts who have, you know, decades of experience in treating autism, and they basically put and then they sought out recommendations from a lot more experts, and they put together basically one set of recommendations that's targeted for insurance companies and for parents and for providers to some extent too. So it's very useful. It'll take a minute, but if you read through it, I think you will actually find the vast majority of it very consumable. It's very straightforward. Most of it is written in good, practical, everyday language.
And is it available to us widely?
Absolutely, yeah. So to download it, you go to BACB.com, and there's a link to it on the homepage. It'll say news, and it'll say practice recommendations for autism, something like that. And just download it for free. It's a PDF. It's about 50 pages or so.
And we've said on the show over and over and over again about how this is a whole new set of circumstances. Everybody's starting out kind of level playing field, that we all don't know enough, but we have to get educated in this about what the criteria is going to be, because it's going to make a difference of how you start ABA, how long ABA happens, when your child is done with ABA. We need to educate ourselves.
That's right. And you know, there's so many different, because ABA is a general science of learning and motivation, it can be applied to pretty much everything. And so that is true for kids with autism as well. So, you know, you could use ABA to teach a child, you know, to cut his toenails or something, versus you could use ABA 30 to 40 hours a week for 4 years with a young child with autism to try to teach them everything they need to know to catch up to the typical development. So there's a huge range of what ABA can be applied to. And so because of all of that, there's a lot of confusion still. And, you know, some providers only provide services for about 10 hours a week. So if that's the case, what are they doing exactly? You know, and how is a parent or an insurance company supposed to know what is that kind of treatment versus a more comprehensive program? And how many hours a week are appropriate for different ages, and you know, who should be supervising, how many kids can one BCBA supervise? Lots of questions about details of how to actually do it and what it looks like that are really unanswered. Folks who've been doing it for a long time, like at CARD, we know, you know, and so there's nothing new in here for us really, but it's great to see like if we had written it, this is essentially what it would look like. So we're really excited to see it.
So you're excited about it.
Yeah, we're really excited about it. It's great.
Well, that's thrilling. And I think as a parent, you know, a lot of times people write in and say, we were with an ABA provider for a year or two, and we finally got to the point where we were fed up and we switched to another ABA provider, and we realized how much time we wasted in those 2 years.
That's scary.
And how are we supposed to know what's good ABA and what isn't good ABA? I mean, even in my community, you know, and I had the benefit of CARD, and there, at a time, as I said earlier, when people got funding for different ABA providers, and so there was my son having ABA, and there was another child that I was aware of within our circle of friends that was starting ABA with a different provider. And I remember about 6 months in, she said, mom said, today was a really bad day. My child was just being really, really difficult, to the point where the therapist said, well, that's it, I just can't work with him today, and left. And I was like, what? What? I mean, the child is going to learn then, if I'm difficult enough, you will go away.
Of course, yeah.
Like, this is a person who should know that you can't do that. And I was appalled. I was appalled.
There's a huge degree of variability in terms of quality out there. It's really scary. Even somewhere like here in Southern California, where we have probably the highest concentration of great ABA providers, but even here, there's a huge degree of variation in quality. And a lot of the details that really affect quality and outcomes that aren't necessarily specified by anyone previously are described pretty well here. I mean, this isn't going to cover every single thing you need to know, but it gives you a good basic structure
great.
of what it should look like.
And it's free. We can download
That's
it.
right.
Fabulous. Okay, so let's take it in little increments like everything we do.
Sure.
Tell us a little bit about some salient points that we need to be aware of.
Okay, so on page, it has several different sections, and on page 11 is a section that outlines essential practice elements of ABA. So these are basic features that no matter what provider you go to, no matter what your child's situation is, if they're a child with ASD getting ABA treatment, you should see most or all of these basic elements in place. So let's just run through them real quick.
Good.
Some of them are going to be pretty obvious. Some of them might be talked about less. First key element is description of specific levels of behavior at baseline. So when your kid first comes in, the provider needs to do an assessment of all of their skills, all of their challenging behaviors, and give you a clear picture with data of what your child's current status is. It's not, a lot of sort of lower quality providers will come in and just sort of do their cookie cutter cookbook approach to, every kid has the same program, regardless of their current level of functioning, which is just contrary to the whole philosophy of ABA. It's crazy.
And that's a hard meeting, by the way, when you see how far your child is behind, but it's an important meeting.
That's right, absolutely.
You got to hear it once, and then you can get into the progress.
That's right. And when each new teaching lesson is introduced, the provider does that again. I mean, they do a brief probe. Maybe it only takes a minute, but they do a brief probe of does this kid already have this skill? And they do an assessment of baseline performance to make sure you're not wasting the kid's time by teaching them stuff they already know.
Absolutely.
All right, number 2, a practical focus on establishing small units of behavior which build towards larger, more significant changes in functioning related to improved health and levels of independence. So establishing small units of behavior. So this is how we always talk about baby steps in ABA, right? You don't start out by trying to teach the whole alphabet. You start by teaching one letter, right? And not even just every way you could talk about one letter, but maybe just matching letters, right? And that's never an end in itself. That's always with the goal of combining all these different behaviors into larger, more functional skills.
Right. Okay.
Number 3, collection, quantification, and analysis of direct observational data. So if you're doing ABA, you got to collect some data, and different providers have slightly different ways of doing that, and that's okay. And there is some evidence to suggest that maybe you can take data only on the first trial of each target on every given day, but you got to collect some data. So man, if you see, if you have a kid on the spectrum getting ABA therapy and your ABA therapist says, well, we don't want to waste time on data collection, they don't know what they're talking about. Period.
In families, you see people carrying around these books, these binders
there's
that
no way
collect
around
the data.
And there's a simple reason why, because human memory isn't good enough. It just isn't. And that goes for everything we do,
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
I mean, just try going shopping without a list and see if your memory is good enough, let alone teaching a child everything he needs to know to catch up to typical development. Are you kidding me?
Absolutely. And to know if what you're doing is working.
Right, and you have 5 different therapists working with the child and a supervisor, and the parents have input and everything that you're supposed to just remember. It's impossible.
It's not effective. It's not efficient.
Exactly. Number 4, an emphasis on understanding the current function and future value of behaviors targeted for treatment. So that means understanding why a kid is doing what they're doing, right? And and understanding why you would expect them to do what you want them to do in the future. So man, if you're teaching a skill, there better be a function for that skill in the child's future life.
Right.
So if you're teaching letters, there better be an opportunity for the kid to read or to point out letters or talk about letters in the future. If there isn't, what are you doing wasting the kid's time?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And a lot of these are common sense, and you would think, okay, well, this should be in every program because it should. And why do we have to say it? But it is important to define things so that you have a guideline to see.
And frankly, every time that you think about, talk about, or look at your kid's program, you could just take this little checklist and just make a check mark there. If it's there, fine, done. You don't have to think about it again.
Right.
But I'll bet frequently you'll find that at least 1 or 2 of these things is being neglected. And in some bad quality programs, I'll bet half of these are being neglected.
Okay, frightening.
Okay, and you just cut me off whenever we need to go.
No, you're doing fine.
Number 5, efforts to design, establish, and manage the treatment environments in order to minimize problem behaviors and maximize rate of reinforcement. So an emphasis on controlling the treatment environment. So it's not just chaos, it's not just craziness. And the purpose of doing this is to decrease challenging behaviors and provide lots of opportunities for reinforcement. Okay.
And you know what's striking to me about this, and correct me if I'm wrong in this, but if these guidelines are adopted and if insurance companies start to follow them, it empowers us as consumers.
Absolutely.
Because at some point, somebody if it hasn't happened already, I'm sure it's already happened, that somebody, you know, the insurance company assigns you a provider and they come and they start doing, and you see that these things aren't here, you're going to have to petition to get a different provider.
Absolutely.
And to be able to show they're not doing these things is how you're going to get it done.
That's exactly right. And insurance companies don't want to pay for bad quality therapy. They're not going to do it. So if you, I mean, if it's the case that, you know, your provider's not doing these things, they're not going to pay that provider. You're going to get a different provider.
Right. There we go. Okay. That's why we need to know this stuff.
Number 6, use of carefully constructed, individualized, and detailed behavior analytic treatment plan, which utilizes reinforcement and other behavior analytic principles as opposed to the use of methods or techniques which lack consensus about their effectiveness based on evidence and peer-reviewed publications. So that's kind of a mouthful, but what it's saying is your child's treatment plan should be individualized and should be detailed, and it should be based on procedures that have been proven to work. So if your child's supervisor has a hunch about a new way to do something, that's fine. They should test it out with data and see if it works. But the first step should always be to do something that we already know works, because it's worked for thousands of kids previously.
Right. I always like to say my kid's not a petri dish.
Right, exactly. All right, number 7, an emphasis on ongoing and frequent direct assessment, analysis, and adjustments to the treatment plan. I mean, I cannot emphasize this enough. You know, probably 99% of the bad quality ABA programs that I've observed lack that. They lack careful, thoughtful, and analytic assessment of child progress on an ongoing basis. You know, so you got the supervisor coming in and looking at the kid's program saying, yeah, it looks like he's doing pretty good. Let's, you know, let's keep going for a couple more weeks and see what happens. No. Every single teaching lesson in the child's program is like an experiment where you're saying, does this intervention work for this child, right? And if it doesn't, you need to do something different. It's not good enough to just try for a while, right? That's the whole point of data collection, and graphing the data is for careful analysis and supervision.
Right, because, and I think this is a really important point, because a lot of us were told before we started ABA that our children just couldn't do certain things because they had autism. But in truth, if our child is having ABA and we're not seeing progress, one of the variables needs to be shifted in some direction, some way, somehow. We don't keep beating our head against the same wall saying, we're doing it this way and eventually they're going to get it. That's not this song.
That's right. And, you know, just a basic rule is kids learn stuff in ABA programs. Kids learn stuff in ABA programs, period. It doesn't matter how affected your child is, they are going to learn something. There is a huge amount of variability in response to treatment, so some kids are going to learn, learn super fast. Some kids it's going to be more challenging, but you will see progress. If you're not seeing progress, it's not a good ABA program, period.
And I love about you guys that you behaviorists, that you say, and if they're not, kids learn in ABA programs, and if they're not, it's not the kid's fault.
It's not the kid. Yeah, absolutely.
Love that. Okay.
Okay, number 8, use of treatment protocols that are implemented repeatedly, frequently, and consistently across environments until the client can function independently in multiple situations. So this idea of the need for consistency, and consistency across environments, consistency across caregivers, across therapists is really, really crucial. You know what this one reads to me? If they're not going to the birthday parties with you, they're not getting it completely done. That's what I read in the parentheses. I love it.
They have to go different places. You have to. This has to work in the grocery store while I'm going through the aisle.
Absolutely.
And so if you're just doing it around the kitchen table and getting a great result, that's wonderful. But it has to work out in the real world.
Right. Exactly. And so I'll contrast, the opposite of this is the type of sort of drop-in or pull-out services that you'll see where your kid gets 1 hour a week of you name it, whatever other therapy, and that's it. And then there's no attempt to even see outside of that 1 hour a week whether or not gains are actually being made, right? And so you can name whatever therapy you want in that 1 hour a week. There's a lot of them. ABA is the opposite of that. We don't, and that's partially why we don't do 1 hour a week, because it's not enough. We do a lot more than, but also we're looking for generalization outside of those treatment sessions.
Right. Okay.
And if we don't get that, we're not doing our job. That's not an afterthought. That is the goal of treatment.
Okay.
Okay. Number 9, direct support and training of family members and or other involved professionals. Okay, so parent involvement is really key. And if you don't have that, again, you're not doing your job as a behavior analyst. The parents have to be involved, or whoever it is, the guardians, the grandparents, whoever it is that's part of the child family unit and family system needs to be involved in treatment from the very beginning.
Absolutely. And that's a wonderful thing for us. I know a lot of parents get into this, and there's big controversy right now about some organizations that are saying, oh, the parents should be doing this. But this is saying something that the parents need to learn along with. And that,
yeah, they need to be involved in professionally delivered therapy,
yes.
not take the place of.
Right.
The parents are not doing the treatment. The parents are being involved in the treatment.
And this is great for us because it means that the babysitter comes over and you get some help and support, that grandma comes to visit, and there's, you know, they're helping grandma to know how to be able to accomplish the same tasks you want. This is a plus.
Exactly. Number 10, and I think this is the last bit on these recommendations. Supervision and management by a behavior analyst with expertise and formal training in ABA for the treatment of ASD. So what that means is not just anybody can supervise these programs. You need to be an expert in supervising ABA programs for kids with autism. Okay?
Right.
If you don't have that expertise and that training in particular, you're not qualified to do it.
Okay.
Now, ideally, that's someone with a BCBA. You know, and more we're getting to that where, you know, all the master's level folks who are expert clinicians have a BCBA. We're getting closer to that.
Right.
I would say today, no, not everybody needs to have a BCBA, because I know plenty of amazing clinicians that just haven't taken the test yet, you know, or got some other different kind of degree, or maybe they're a licensed psychologist. But more and more we're moving towards these folks should be board certified behavior analysts, and frankly, medical insurance requires it. So that's just, you know, a given now.
What about the other professionals in the field of mental health who feel that they're qualified?
Well, yeah, so what really matters is your actual training and expertise, not what letters are next to your name, right? And the BCBA certification ensures at least a minimum level of training and expertise, because it, you know, it shows that you took those classes, you had some supervised experience, and you passed the test. However, there are plenty of other, I mean, I know I have friends that are, let's say, licensed social workers, licensed marriage and family therapists who have been doing this for 15 years and are absolute champs. And, you know, I would be happy for them to supervise my kids' treatment, you know what I mean? So, yeah, they can do it too. However, more and more, honestly, they're not even going to be able to bill for funding anymore if they don't get the BCBA. So even all of these folks who are just champs are still going and getting, just take the 5 classes, get the experience, take the test. It's not that hard.
And which brings home that this is a recommendation. Insurance companies have not yet adopted this. This just came out recently.
This just came out, and the purpose of this is to help inform what insurance companies will do. However, each insurance company is allowed to make their own, or does make their own policy handbooks. They have to comply with law, state law, but they're allowed to make their own policies. This is not law. This is just recommendations by the BACB, and this is not specific to any state. The BACB is an international organization.
Right. So perhaps at some point we can, you know, an insurance company maybe as a marketing tool can say, and we have adopted these principles recommended by this organization.
No insurance company will ever do that, but they might never. They will never do that because they will always reserve the right to make their own policies and their own handbooks, which is true. I mean, they do have the right to do that. However, hopefully,
we should know these things.
And you should push for this. Yeah, you should say, I want something like this, and hopefully their response will be, yeah, we based our policy on this.
All right, good to know. We're going to take a break and come back and talk about some of the other things, other reasons why you might want to, you definitely want to, not might want to, you definitely want to read this and inform yourself. Stick with us.
My name is Rocky.
Autism used to affect 1 in every 10,000 children. Now it affects 1 in every 91 kids.
TACA is one of 5 organizations helping families living with autism today.
Our kids came back to life. There's a whole community out there, and now we're a part of it.
Oh. TACA has a place for me.
To find TACA, go to www.tacanow.org.
Please.
Welcome back to Autism Live. We're here with Dr. Jonathon Tarbox. You are the head of research and development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders and the executive director of the Autism Research Group.
Correct.
And we have been talking about recommendations that have recently come out for standards of
care, basically. What constitutes evidence-based and medically necessary treatment for children with autism spectrum disorders.
Okay, and this is really helpful to parents. This is information that we can get for free, that we can download, and really use it as a tool to determine whether the ABA that we're receiving in our homes is what it should be.
Absolutely. And frankly, you know, Well, first of all, I'd recommend every single parent of a child with autism should download this and read this. Okay. Even if you're not getting ABA with your child, download this and read this. This is going to teach you a lot about what ABA is.
Fabulous.
And it may well show you some of the things that you actually might want to have for your child.
Okay, and tell us again where we can get this for free.
BACB.com.
Okay.
Download it from their homepage, and it's free. It's a PDF that you download, print it out, save it, read it on your iPhone, whatever.
Okay, great. So we talked a little bit about, you know, things that the program has to have. What's the next component of this?
Okay, so the next component that they outline is a general description of sort of two different categories of overall models of treatment. So like I was saying in our earlier segment, ABA can be, you know, applied to a million different things, to any scale you can think of, from teaching one little teeny little skill all the way up to 3 years of teaching everything a kid needs to know. And so there's a lot of questions about, well, how much ABA is the right amount, or how many skills should we be targeting, and for what age, etc. And so the BACB adopted a model that we've been promoting also, which is a distinction between comprehensive, comprehensive ABA treatment versus targeted or focused ABA treatment.
Okay, great.
So it's not this black and white. It's, you know, there's a lot of probably categories in between, but this is at least one way to sort of conceptualize it that makes sense and is useful.
It does.
So comprehensive basically means you address everything. Targeted means there's specific goals, and you work on those until that's done.
Okay.
Okay, so let's go through some of the specifics that they give.
Okay.
Okay, so focused ABA. Focused ABA involves direct service delivery to the client. It's not restricted by age, cognitive level, or co-occurring conditions. And focused ABA refers to treatment provided directly to the client for a limited number of behavioral targets. So let me give you an example. If a child comes through our door and is not potty trained, has a significant amount of challenging behavior, and has no real functional communication at all, the parent might say, help. You know, I need to get rid of these problem behaviors. I need him potty trained, and I need him be able to at least be able to tell me when he wants something, right? Without having a tantrum. So then what we might put together is a treatment plan that targets those specific 3 areas, and that's the purpose of this child's ABA treatment, is to deal with those 3 areas, and we're going to keep doing it until we fix those 3 areas, or until we meet the goals that we've prescribed for those 3 areas, and then after that, the kid's done.
Okay.
Okay. Notice that I didn't say anything about the age of the person.
Right.
I did say kid, but actually when you think about it, it could be an adult. It could be a 60-year-old. I've worked with 60-year-olds.
Right.
So it doesn't matter what age, it doesn't matter what other conditions they have, so they could certainly have intellectual disability or CP or you name it, any other disabilities.
Right.
And it doesn't matter what setting they live in. So this could be in the home, it could be, you know, in the school, it could be maybe the kid's living in a group home or an institution, or you name it.
Right.
But the idea is targeted, short-term, fix these problems. When we're done with these problems, we're done.
Okay, and I would imagine the flip of that is true too, that because a lot of times we have people write in and they assume that because they have older, high-functioning kids that ABA is closed off to them because it has to be this thing where you're 40 hours a week and their child's going to school and doesn't need that, and they think that ABA is ridiculous.
Exactly.
But this could be for them as well, that if your child is just having social issues that you would like to target.
Thank you for pointing that out, because oftentimes people think of targeted or focused intervention as just sort of putting out fires for emergencies, like, oh my God, you know, self-injurious behavior or aggression. But you're exactly right. It can be targeted to just specific social skills. So my child's doing great, lots of language, wants to make friends. It seems like the other kids want to be friends with my child, but he has no perspective-taking ability at all. What do I do about this? Well, we can put together a targeted intervention just to teach a wide range of perspective-taking skills. So we make some goals, maybe 5 or 10 perspective-taking goals. We're going to work on these goals with the kid until the kid's done with those goals.
Right.
And that's that.
For the kid who's doing so great, there were at least 2 people that wrote in this summer and talked about kids that were getting ready to go off to college and saying, I don't, like, where can I go to teach my very high-functioning kid who intellectually is ready for college, but emotionally and just the idea of riding the bus and looking at the signs and knowing what to do when flexibility, when, you know, situations, how do I trust that my child's really ready and not go with them? So these kinds of things could address that.
That's right. You could absolutely put together a treatment plan that addresses sort of college readiness skills or transition skills, independent living skills, any of those things.
So really wonderful, you know, that we can look at it good in this way. But then there are other people that it's the flip, that that have kids that they want the full bore.
Right, and so that's the comprehensive. Oh, and by the way, real quick, for focused ABA, there's literally hundreds of studies showing that this works for children and adolescents and even adults with autism. Hundreds of studies supporting this method of treatment.
Okay,
now,
I think it's so important that parents know that that's an option.
Absolutely. And comprehensive ABA treatment, on the other hand, is sort of the flip, and the goal here is to address essentially every skill deficit and every behavior problem that a person is experiencing at any given time.
Right.
And so the classic thing that we think of, and the approach that has the most research behind it in terms of comprehensive services, is young children with autism. So starting as early as possible, starting at, let's say, 3.5 or 4 or 5 at the latest, or younger, and continuing for 30 to 40 hours a week and for 2 to 4 years, okay? Or, you know, if they're completely done earlier, that's fine, but with most kids, it could take 2 to 4 years. The goal of comprehensive,
5 for us.
well, yeah, absolutely.
That's 5 for us.
The goal of comprehensive ABA is to catch the child up. This is the basic idea, is teach the maximum you can in the amount of time that you have them.
Right.
Because the funding's gonna run out, you know, the kid is going to get older, so the goal is teach as much as you can. For some children who experience this type of treatment, they're going to recover from autism, and that's the word that we use to describe the fact that there are no more clinically significant skill deficits anymore. We just don't have anything left to teach. So they're done with us because they've graduated. There's literally nothing left to teach. Most kids still aren't going to have that outcome, but even kids that aren't going to recover are going to learn a lot. And the goal with them is to maximize their skill development across every area of human functioning so that they can function as independently as possible.
Now, first question that I have, because so many people write in and feel like they missed the boat because they wanted this for their kids, but now their child is 6, or their child is 8, or their child is 12.
Right.
What do you say to those families? Like, is there still a possibility of doing a comprehensive ABA program with a 10-year-old?
There's no research on comprehensive ABA programs for kids who are school age or older. It just hasn't been done yet. The oldest study was done by, the study with the oldest kids in comprehensive ABA was done by Sven Eikeseth and colleagues in Norway. Got some great behavior analysts out in Norway. And what they did was they studied 30 hours a week of ABA for 2.5 years, and the kids were between the ages of 4 and 7 at intake. So a little bit older. It's not early intervention anymore, but it's not, you know, adolescence by any means. Between 4 and 7 at intake, that means they were between 6.5 and 9.5 when they were done.
Right.
Okay. And that study showed very strong effects and showed very clearly that comprehensive ABA can have very large treatment effects for that group. And they compared it to another group of kids that were getting just sort of eclectic special education for the same number of hours and the same level of intensity, all 1-to-1, and a huge difference in outcome. So comprehensive ABA has been proven to work for kids between 4 and 7 at intake.
Okay.
But for the older, I didn't really answer your question for the older kids, right?
Well, but you did, because you said the research isn't there.
Right.
And my thing, because you're the executive director of the Autism Research Group, and you know, one of the things that you are always asking parents is, what would you like some more research on? And I want to encourage everybody who's watching, who's asked those questions, write in to the Autism Research Group if you want that kind of study to be done, because I'm assuming that that's really what it takes, is enough people saying this is important enough.
Well, it's going to be really challenging, because the problem with doing research on comprehensive ABA treatment is it's incredibly costly. So, you know, to get 30 or 40 hours a week of treatment, depending on a lot of different variables, it could cost upwards of $60,000 to $100,000 a year for one kid. And to have a big enough group of kids to where you can actually have a group design where you have a treatment group and a control group, you might need 20 or 30 kids all getting that, and then you need it for maybe 2 or 3 years. So do the math. It ends up being extraordinarily expensive. So who's going to pay for that? Right now, essentially no one will pay, well, that's not true, not nobody, but very few people will pay for that much ABA treatment for older kids in research. So
are we going to see then with the insurance that when people have older children and they get ABA, that the insurance company is going to say that 10 hours is they're not going to go for the comprehensive?
We don't know. We don't know yet. And actually what the BACB recommends is that the choice between comprehensive and focused intervention be made not on the basis of age, but on the basis of the clinical priorities for the individual and the goals that are necessary for each individual. So for example, we could have a 12-year-old kid whose aggression is so severe that it puts people in danger, and 40 hours a week may well be justified for that child, even if he had no other real significant deficits, right? So 40 hours a week, yes, absolutely, just in order to control the aggression so he doesn't hurt himself or other people. You know, so it totally depends on the individual child. For younger kids, the prescription is clear: 30 to 40 hours a week for 2 or more years. Period. It doesn't even matter what the goals are.
But it's clear because the research showed that it was effective.
Because the research shows, yeah. So for older kids, you know, they're not taking a stance. The BACB is not taking a stance on the specific number of hours, and quite frankly, there isn't any research basis for taking a stance on the number of hours. You need to customize each individual child's treatment plan based on their unique needs and how clinically significant their impairment is.
Okay. All right. Well, there's room there for people on an individual basis.
Yeah.
But clearly, somebody needs to get that study done.
Yeah, you know, we're working on it.
Okay, all right. Because I'm looking at you. I got nobody else to look at, so I'm looking at you. I hear that like it needs backing, but you know, maybe that's the thing that we all need to put some time and energy into as parents, because we know that we drive this bus. How loud we yell, when we yell, and what we say at least drives part of the bus.
You know, I will say I was in Minnesota yesterday visiting a center called the Minnesota Autism Center, which is a great ABA provider up there in the Minneapolis area. They've got multiple centers and schools, and they're actually implementing skills now. They're a really fantastic outfit, and they serve many kids in the slightly older range, and they are doing up to 30, 40 hours a week sometimes with these kids, and they're seeing great results. And so I've actually been talking to them about potentially publishing some of those data. But again, it's a huge project. But yeah, people are doing it, and it does work. And quite frankly, I mean, the thing is, we know from an ABA perspective and even a common sense perspective that the more time you spend learning something, the faster you're going to learn it, right? If you want to get good at anything, what do? Practice it a lot. So if you're 10, 12 years old, if you want to maximize that kid's skill development, 30 hours is going to be better than 20, you know, 40 is going to be better than 30. So. Yeah,
I just want to send the message home to parents, though, that, you know, because a lot of them feel disheartened and like, I missed that boat. I missed that boat. That don't decide not to do ABA in any way. Go for the progress. Focus on what you can get. Go for the progress, and we'll keep plugging on that. But
and if you want to maximize your child's skill development, the status of the scientific research on autism treatment today is entirely clear. ABA is your best bet to make your child's skills develop the most and the fastest in the short amount of time you have to work on it.
Okay.
So yeah, it doesn't matter what age your child is. If there's something he needs to learn, ABA procedures can teach him to do that.
Okay. We're running out of time. So just in terms of an overview, what are some of the other things? I noticed when you went down the list earlier, one of the things was that there is a recommendation in here about when it's time to stop therapy, when the child is done. Because I know a lot of us have questions about how is the insurance company going to decide at what point. Even for us, you know, we went through the regional center and had funding, and it was always the question, I always felt like I was left out of that discussion about when the regional center was going to decide to end funding. And I would always pound on the table and say, here's what we need. And
well, you know, the honest answer, the no BS answer is funding providers are going to end treatment as soon as they can because they don't have enough funding.
Right.
So their motivation, I mean, of course they want to help the kids, yes.
Absolutely.
And when I say funding providers, I'm talking about regional centers, school district, insurance companies, you name it. They don't have enough funding to treat all of the kids that they need to fund treatment for, and so they are going to end the child's treatment as soon as they can kind of get away with it, you know, and there's a lot of variation. There's certainly some funding providers that they're going to stick with it until it really truly is clinically okay to let go. But I'm sorry, there's a lot of funding providers that are not. They're going to quit funding as soon as they can, as soon as they can do it without the parents getting too upset, essentially.
But there's a criteria in here that sets up guidelines for when it's appropriate clinically?
Well, they have guidelines for the process of determining this. There's no hard and fast, you know, criteria for when services should be terminated. That's going to be different for every individual child. But yeah, they do, if I can just get to it.
I'm sorry,
here.
I sprung that on you.
No, no problem.
Because we're so towards the end, and there's so much information in here about setting how many hours is appropriate, as I'm seeing as you're flipping through. But again, we can't state often enough how important it is that we educate ourselves and take advantage of this document that's free. That's going to help us to know what's appropriate.
And so here's some basic guidelines they give for discharging. So how do you know when it's appropriate to discharge a client from ABA therapy? And here's the basic guidelines they give. So first of all, when the client has achieved the treatment goals. So if you're doing a focused intervention, and again, let's say it's teaching perspective taking skills, and you make 10 different goals of perspective taking, including generalization of those skills to everyday peer interactions. When you've documented, yeah, the kid can do all of that now, you're done.
Right.
No reason to stick around any longer. You might want to do some transition planning and maybe a little bit of follow-up consultation to make sure, so you can ensure maintenance. But you've achieved the goals that you set.
Okay.
The next one is the client no longer meets the diagnostic criteria for ASD. So that's for the recovery kids who, and that's nice to see this in writing from the BACB. They're not using the word recovery, but that's what they're talking about here.
They don't fit it anywhere.
They don't, they can't be diagnosed as having autism anymore. So for the recovery kids, that's also very clear. And gosh darn it, it's obvious when we recover a kid, we don't want him to stick around anymore. I mean, we'll miss him and it's sad, but we're so happy to see him go. It's graduation day.
Yeah, absolutely.
Number 3, the client does not demonstrate progress towards goals for successive authorization periods. So this is an important one.
It is an important one.
And I say that kids learn in ABA programs, period. That is true. Every kid's going to have a different rate of progress. Kids don't necessarily learn in bad quality ABA programs, okay? So if your provider is doing a bad job with your child, you might not see any progress. It could be functionally equivalent to babysitting. I've seen that before. Thankfully not very often, but it does occur. So this criterion here is put in there to guard against that. And of course, we don't even need to worry about that. Medical insurance companies are going to be worrying about that. If we're not able to demonstrate progress, they're not going to fund anymore.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm hearing, is that as a parent, you need to make sure, you need to keep drilling to make sure that the progress is happening, or you're going to lose your funding source.
That's right. And it's also possible in some cases, if the goals were set by someone who's not very good at setting goals that are individualized and appropriate, that the goals that were set are unreasonable. So for example, there are some kids who are not going to develop vocal speech, and so if that's one of the goals and you've achieved everything else and you've been working with the kid for years and you're not working on some other kind of non-vocal communication system, that would be pretty stupid, first of all. But if you're showing look, he's not making vocal speech, and 3 months go by, we assess it, no progress. Another 3 months, no progress. Another 3 months, and we've tried every single thing that's been proven to work to develop vocal speech, then at some point, maybe 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, it is maybe appropriate to say, maybe we're not going to make so much progress in that.
Okay. This is all really wonderful, and I want to thank you so much. As we're finishing up talking, I'm going to ask Emily to play some of the different ways that you can get in touch with us during the weekend, because we'd love for the conversation to continue. You can always ask questions of any expert that we've had here on the show, and we know that Dr. Tarbox comes in every week on Friday, but we also know where to get a hold of him if it's something that needs to be addressed before the following Friday. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing this with us.
Every parent, go to BACB.com.
I'm going to get it today.
And download.
I'm going to get it today, and we'll continue to talk about this from time to time in the coming weeks and months and see what happens with insurance. As we leave you this weekend, one of the things that I want to tell you is I'm celebrating a huge birthday tomorrow. It's true, I'm turning 50. I know, it's just shocking,
No
right?
kidding.
Yes, tomorrow. And I said that I wanted to do something different for this birthday, and so you'll see if you go, I don't think we put it up yet, but I'll do it in just a few minutes, on our Facebook page. What I want to do is, in commemoration of my 50th birthday, is to make sure that at least one child gets an iPad. And so we're asking for donations of just $1, just $1 to Act Today. And you can access that on our Facebook page. We're going to put it up in just a minute. And so idea. just $1, because I want to know that, in some way something changes. And we know what can happen if you put things in a child's hand. And so for one child who doesn't have a way to communicate to have a new way, I want that for one parent.
That's great, and what a cheap way for your viewers to be able to give you a little birthday present. $1.
Yes, and that will make my birthday. So $1 if you can, and if you can't, I get it. Boy, I know sometimes you just don't even have that, but if you do, I guarantee you'll feel better. In any case, we'll be back on Monday. I'll be 50 then, but we'll be back on Monday at 10 a.m. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me. Bye-bye for now.